right, good morning. It's wonderful to have you here at Shifting the Paradigm, where we're going to speak about artist managers, these important architects of the artists who end up on stage and how they are committed to increasing diversity in our industry. I'm Mark Williams. I am the Beck family CEO of the Toronto Symphony Orchestra. For the past 15 years, I have worked with orchestras, first in senior roles at the San Francisco Symphony, and most recently at the Cleveland Orchestra, where I was for 9 years, the Chief Artistic and Operations Officer. I am thrilled to have a distinguished panel with me today. Starting to my left, we have Christina Baker. Christina's career spans over 2 decades in the realm of arts management and representation, with a rich professional journey, including agencies such as Columbia Artist Management, ICM Artist, Opus 3 Artist, and having established her own firm, Baker Artists. Christina has been a key player in shaping the trajectories of numerous influential artists within the industry, currently serving as the Senior Director of Artist Management at Young Concert Artists. She plays a pivotal role in fostering the early careers of emerging classical musicians, contributing significantly to the institution's mission of providing young artists with the support and confidence to tell their stories and the tools, opportunities, and infrastructures to take their careers to the highest level. Please join me in welcoming Christina Baker. Our next panelist is Charlotte Lee. Charlotte Lee is the president and founder of Primo Artists, one of the world's leading artist management agencies. Based in New York, Primo Artists represents such esteemed artists as Itzhak Perlman, Joshua Bell, Nicola Benedetti, Songjin Cho, Wynton Marsalis, Valerie Coleman, and Randall Gooseby. Charlotte grew up playing the violin before starting her career in the music business 25 years ago at Universal Classics. She joined IMG Artists in 1998 and worked there for 17 years, where she was the director of the company's orchestral booking department and a senior vice president managing artists such as Itzhak Perlman and Nicola Benedetti. In 2015, Charlotte founded Primo Artists, which has distinguished itself as one of the most modern agencies in the field and the only agency that offers artist management, social media management, and public relations to artists and institutions. Primo handles PR representation for many of the artists in this room today, including the Sphinx Organization, American Composers Orchestra, Curtis Stewart, Joseph Conyers, Seth Parker Woods, Catalyst Quartet, and Lincoln Center. An active advocate, Charlotte is also the founder and leader of the Performing Arts Managers and Agents Coalition, and was a principal in leading the industry-wide lobbying effort that led to the enactment of the Shuttered Venues Operators Grants Program, providing $16.5 billion in relief to the arts and culture industry. Please join me in welcoming Charlotte Lee. And last but certainly not least, we have Dr. Tommy Mesa. Cuban-American cellist, Dr. Tommy Mesa has established himself as one of the most charismatic, innovative, and engaging performers of his generation. The recipient of the Sphinx Organization 2023 Medal of Excellence, its highest honor, Mesa has appeared as soloist at the Supreme Court of the United States on 4 occasions, and with major orchestras, including the Los Angeles Philharmonic at the Hollywood Bowl, the Cleveland Orchestra, the Philadelphia Orchestra, and the symphony orchestras of Indianapolis, Madison, New Jersey, San Antonio, and Santa Barbara, among many others. Mesa gave the world premiere and subsequent tour of Jesse Montgomery's Cello Concerto in the 22-23 season, with performances at major halls across the United States and Brazil, including Miami's New World Center and Carnegie Hall. His orchestral recording debut of the work was released in July 2023 on Deutsche Grammophon. Please welcome Dr. Tommy Mesa. So I didn't say earlier that before starting to work with orchestras, I worked in arts management myself. So this is a conversation near and dear to my heart. And I'm very grateful to the Sphinx Organization for inviting me to be here with you today. So let's dive in. I want to start with you, Charlotte. You are running your own agency, and it is an agency that I would say is absolutely innovative, but of course is coming from a more traditional view of management. I have a really basic question, which is, As we think about managers and the role that they have to play in building diversity on our stages, I immediately go to, is this a supply and demand issue, right? Will greater diversity come from a greater demand for diverse artists, or will it come from managers really changing their supply? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Thanks, Mark. It's the million-dollar question. For the last 4 years, we have been encountering a huge rise, as we all know, on the focus on diversity. And it's wonderful that we have these opportunities now for BIPOC artists, and it's long overdue. I'm actually a believer that everything needs to be based in excellence, and here at Sphinx, we always say that diversity is excellence. And it's important to remember that principle, because if you let yourself get led by any, say, quote, trend of the industry, it lacks the substance and the sustainability. It becomes tokenism. But if you base everything in excellence, then there's no question of the sustainability. With regard to the supply and the demand, it becomes a problem when you lead with diversity or whatever trend it may be, because there's a problem in the supply. It goes back to the pipeline, which I'm sure we'll dig into, but it's an overall ecosystem and systematic question. Managers are at the very end of that ecosystem. The ecosystem has to start from the very beginning of the pipeline, which starts in education and funding and scholarships being provided for people of all color to not be inhibited from these opportunities. And so once you have that healthy pipeline, then you have the supply, and then if the demand comes, great. But without that pipeline and without the fundamental principle of excellence leading you, it can lead to a short supply, an over demand, and unfortunately it leads to an outcome that's not healthy, where some musicians and artists may be receiving these opportunities simply because of the color of their skin, and they may not be ready for it.
Right,
So.
right. And of course, managers have a lot to do in that, and of course, we're going to speak to that. And I realize this question feels a bit chicken and egg, but it is so fundamental to the work that we're trying to accomplish. So, Christina, you are at Young Concert Artists. Maybe you would speak a little bit about how the work that you do at YCA is inherently a bit different from what the work that Charlotte does, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on where this starts.
Sure. I think the artists that we have, they come to us, obviously they're young artists. And artists of color right now are getting incredibly busy incredibly quickly. And they're young, and so they're still figuring out what their capacities are, what their limits are. That's a journey that is kind of interesting to be on the ground with them. But it takes a few years to figure out how many concertos can I carry, how much repertoire can I tour with, and just getting used to touring and being on a plane. And so we help them figure out those limitations. And I have found currently with the climate is that there's so much demand, and these artists have all of a sudden become so busy. In the case of Xavier Foley, not just performing, but composing, and having to sort of deal with that and figure out his pacing. But as far as the pipeline, I think we're in a very exciting time. YCA has a full-time education and community engagement director. Every artist that comes through will visit schools. We actually have a few Title I schools that don't have a music program. In fact, YCA is their music program, and we have artists go in and visit them a couple of times a year, and build a curriculum. So I think it starts there, and I think we need to raise storytellers and communicators who leave the concert stage and go right into the classroom and recruit more incredible young people.
Thank you, thank you. Tommy, I'm curious about, you are the person on the stage, right? Like this whole conversation is about making sure that you and people like you are really well represented on our stage. How do you find how have you found this sort of supply demand issue? You've been playing for a long time, and have you seen a sort of increased desire in BIPOC musicians, and how has that affected you?
Yeah, I of course, started my journey with Sphinx. This was in 2016, the year I won the competition, and since then, I've been so involved with Sphinx in every single way, and it's been an unbelievable journey that I've met so many unbelievable composers and managers and presenters, and being a part of this community has essentially projected my career into a realm that has made it sustainable, and not only sustainable, but I love it, and I love every part of it because I get to hear wonderful composers from underrepresented communities, and I get to play their music, literally share their thoughts and their experiences through a medium, through this little piece of wood. And so, for me, being a part of that pipeline in a way, and the conversation that we're going to get into, like you said, the heart of this conversation is really the pipeline, the educational pipeline. And, in 2016, I was 26. You could argue that I was, beyond the pipeline. But my pipeline journey started then in a lot of ways. In the journey of, all the opportunities that were given to me by Sphinx to be in front of people, premiering pieces, getting funding to commission composers that allowed me more performance experiences. It was sort of this domino effect. And that made me a much better artist, human being, and someone who, is constantly trying to find excellence, as you were saying. And it's not just tokenism. It's finding great music among communities that perhaps just you need to take a chance sometimes on maybe somebody who isn't as well known, because it's so easy for everyone to just follow, this composer's being commissioned,
right.
So we're just going to keep commissioning that composer because everyone loves that music. But really what I found the hardest part is finding the people that you don't know. Right,
and taking that risk and having that bravery.
Taking that risk and seeing the excellence and doing your research so that you don't just follow the commissioning pattern or presenting artists that are the pattern of, that everyone else is hiring. And so finding excellence, I think, in these communities, I think it's extremely important. And I've just been so grateful to be a part of that in little ways.
Well, let's get to. I think everyone's raring to go on this part of the conversation. We were backstage talking about what we talk about, and we all agreed that really the heart of this conversation is pipeline, right? And Tommy, I'd love to start with you. Where do you see? Sometimes pipeline feels like a hot potato, right? It's the presenter's problem. No, it's education's problem. No, it's managers'. But I think we all have to take some responsibility for it. And I'm really curious to hear, Tommy, from your perspective as an artist, how do you see managers and management engaging with and developing the pipeline that leads to the stage?
Yeah, I guess I can maybe just purely speak from my own experience, which is, with Sarah Dinnan, but also with Lisa Sappenkopf, and the people that I've encountered along the way, collaborators. I'll send an email to one of them and I'll just say, I love this piece and I want to include it in a recital program. And they respond and they're like, I don't know this piece. And then they'll listen to it and they'll actually take the effort to hear it and say, okay, this is not only a good piece, but it's an important piece as far as diversity on the program and representation. And that is going to allow audiences to have a bigger and more important experience. That gives you more views. And so, more perspectives. And that is something that I appreciate about the pipeline that I've experienced, which is managers that haven't pushed back necessarily in a negative way, but that they've really taken what I've wanted to do and supported that. Whether it's my duo with JP Joffrey or with Michelle Can, like there are certain collaborations that, I am so excited about, and that I feel very, very supported by people like you, by people that are appreciate what that message has to offer.
Right.
But
I think
also
you're
supporting
fortunate.
the passion of the artist.
Yeah. Well, Christina, YCA, you are a jury-based management company, right? So you are not scouting per se. You are choosing via jury from musicians who apply for your program. But so you have a couple of different ways that I could imagine that you could affect the pipeline. But I'd love to hear about what you at YCA, what you're doing to work on that pipeline.
I think that we definitely want to sort of cast a wider net, have a bigger pool of applicants. To be selected, I mean, it's obviously, it is what we talk about, excellence and level of playing, and it is a high standard. The last few seasons, I mean, I've been now there for 2.5 years, but looking back at just the last few years with people like Stephen Banks, and Xavier Foley, who are literally, I call them game changers of their instruments, and that they were identified through excellence and through just, no one plays like this. This is incredible. And what I've seen and how that has grown has been so inspiring. And so I think that that's one way of just sort of making sure we have a large pool of applicants.
And how are you ensuring that large pool?
I think, just sort of like being here, for instance. I mean, I've met so many incredible people just here and saying, like, we have auditions in November. Come audition for YCA. Make sure that every community knows about us, that every, it's not just, obviously, over the last few years, it's been most of the major conservatories in the States. It's an international competition or audition. So yeah, making our presence known and the kind of work that we do. For Stephen Banks, for instance, you were talking about commissions. We commissioned a piece for Stephen, which was already in the works before I got to YCA, of Billy Childs, wrote a concerto for him, which we did 12 co-commissioners, 12 orchestras in the States. And for a saxophone player, that's pretty good.
And what about that you said once to me, which is of course so true, that not just people of color, anyone getting management, it's incredibly difficult. I mean, this is a high bar to cross. So what are you doing in YCA that sort of helps the pipeline of the people who even get to audition for YCA?
I think that's going to be done through education and community engagement. I think that's really what we're doing. We had, at the Morgan Library, we had a concert last week, and we had 25 school children come in, and they were amazing, and they were so excited. I think that's what it is. It's access and education.
Yeah. And so, Charlotte, working for a for-profit management company, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the role that managers have to play in that pipeline.
I think that the main thing is what Tommy said, is to take a chance. Managers have an inclination to say no to everything, and you know that because we were longtime colleagues at IMG. When artists come to you and solicit being signed by you, the answer is always no, because our plates are full, and we are emotionally and personally connected to each and every artist on our roster. Something drew us to them, and we have a deep drive and obligation and commitment to do well for them. And there's not enough time in the day to feel good at the end of it and say, my job is done, and I would like to sign a new artist because I want to take on more work. So there's always this inclination to say no. And I think over the decades, the inclination has been even more exaggerated of saying no to certain people. And it's a terrible thing to admit, but this industry for decades has favored, I shouldn't say decades, for 300, 400 years has favored the white European man or woman in recent centuries. And as a person of color, an Asian, I would say that it wasn't until 1967 that the doors opened for Asians, when Kyung-Hwa Chung won the Lemon Tree competition and stepped in for Itzhak Perlman at Carnegie Hall, made a smashing debut, and then she opened the door for people of color. In that same decade, Seiji Ozawa was discovered. He became, soon after, the music director of the Boston Symphony. And before that, we had never seen...
After the Toronto Symphony Orchestra, thank you very much.
That's right. Toronto Symphony gave him that opportunity. He didn't just become music director overnight of BSO, but someone had to give him the chance, and I'm sure that was Walter Hamburger and his predecessors at the TSO. And that led to Asians being accepted and allowed to be considered on management rosters and on the stages of our concert halls. But that was on the string side and then the conducting side. But what happened to the piano world? That was closed for decades.
Right.
No one could, I mean, every Asian person plays the piano, and you didn't see any Asian soloists, right?
That's painting with a broad brush.
It wasn't until August 14th, 1999, when Lang Lang had that opportunity to step in for Andre Watts on that all-star gala where everyone was playing Midori, Isaac Stern, Chicago Symphony, and he became an overnight sensation. That opened the door for Yu Jia Wang to step in for Martha Argerich, and now it's okay to be Asian and have a career because you have the opportunity. And that led to the pipeline of managers saying, ding, 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 okay, now we don't have to essentially block Asians from being signed onto rosters because, those presenters wouldn't book him because he's an Asian male pianist, and everyone wants a Caucasian woman playing the violin in a strapless dress because that's what Anne-Sophie Mutter established for us in 1962 with Karajan. So over time, there's just been this peeling away of this blockage, and now for people of color, Black, Latinx, with the murder of George Floyd in May 2020, all of a sudden, Valerie Coleman, who we represent, went from, actually her increase in demand went 2,000% over 5 months. By the fall of 2020, she was inundated with requests for commissions, and Jesse Montgomery and so many others. So that then opens the pipeline in management. Managements are always going to be inclined to sign what the presenters and record companies want. When Randall Gooseby was signed by Decca Records in the fall of 2020, he got 10 management agency offers. And
After being signed by a record company.
But it took Decca making a stand, taking a chance, as Tommy says, to say, hey, here's excellence, and we're going to take that chance. But it took the catalyst of the murder of George Floyd and an entire movement to open up the marketplace. So management agencies are best off just not being closed to ideas, to taking a risk, to being open, and of course basing everything on excellence.
No. You know, one of the things that I don't think that we talk about enough, in the diversity conversation we speak a lot about what the universities and the conservatories need to be doing, what presenters need to be doing, how programmers, all these things, but I don't think we speak enough about the role of managers, and frankly, how the job of being a manager has changed, right? That the core competencies that you needed to be a successful artist manager in 1970 are very different than what you need today, but it doesn't seem like anyone's really talking about it. I mean, as two people who are on the ground in this work and who've had long careers, like how do you see that work having changed, and what are the skills, the sort of muscles that you have to flex now that maybe you didn't have to think about 15 years ago?
I think for me, it's changed so significantly in this role because I work with just young artists. And it has made me learn. I think I'm learning more now on a daily basis, every day, from this generation of artists, these young people. It has sort of sharpened my skills to be more open, to be listening. Because when you're in this relationship with a person who's developing and figuring themselves out, it's a really extraordinary time. So we always have many roles. We're lawyers, therapists, parents, you name it.
Chauffeurs.
You know, and so I think, but in this particular role, I think it's grown. You know, instead of someone telling me this is the career I want and go get it, it's I don't know what I want, and I'm trying to tell my story, and help me tell my story, and I see myself as sort of a person who's just removing the obstacles for what these incredible young people want to say and what they want to give to the world. So that's how I see it now.
And Charlotte, what about you? How is your how is it different for you in this post George Floyd world where the spotlight, you know, has finally, I mean, in a good way, the spotlight has finally come to diversity in our industry. But as a manager, how does that really affect your day-to-day? How does that affect the work that you do?
I echo what Christina says about being open and learning from our artists, because I think that we came from a tradition of straightforward careers, and the way that we work with artists now is not just a reflection of how truly diverse the representation has become in a beautiful way, but also a reflection of the changing times of our era, post-COVID, not just post-George Floyd. The world is different. Gen Zs, alphas do things differently. It's not straight ahead careers. They're diverse. They compose, they collaborate, they cross genres, they have ensembles and quartets. This is not just a bread and butter concerto career. But beyond that, I think that in management these days, we are seeing a reflection of what the world is seeing, that things happen at an exponentially faster pace. I'm going on 19 years representing Nicola Benedetti. I worked for 13 of those 19 years to just get her on the radar of the New York Philharmonic, LA Philharmonic. Fine, now she's playing with all of them. But it took us 13 years of chipping away and saying, don't look at her face and her body, judge her by her talent and her brains and her innovativeness. And so when I look now at Randall Goosby's career and what we are shepherding, this is not a 13-year trajectory that takes him to the New York Philharmonic. We signed him 2 years ago. This summer he's playing at Central Park with Thomas Wilkins on the Mendelssohn Concerto with the New York Philharmonic. He makes his Proms debut. He was at the Hollywood Bowl with Gustavo Dudamel last year for his Proms debut. And it's happening in 2 years instead of 13 years. So what Christina says about these young musicians who are still in development, who have these fast-tracked careers, we have as managers to be protectors and guardians of our talent. That is our main way of working now. It's not, let's push this and fast-track you to these orchestras on not fast-track, on this 13-year journey. It's happening, and it's so much easier to attain. So instead of take, we have to be guardians and to scrutinize every single opportunity. Tommy, I'm sure you do this with Sarah Dinnan, your manager, to scrutinize, why have I been asked about this opportunity?
Right, right.
Should I be appearing on the Florence Price Concerto, or should I be appearing on the Mendelssohn Concerto? Should I take this, or should I say no?
So it seems that, it seems that protecting and stewarding your talent has always been a primary job of a manager, but that working with BIPOC and diverse artists, it sort of adds a new lens, right? Like there's a new lens, there's a new filter on doing that work to protect them. And it sort of gets me to this belief that that the needs of those artists are not different from their non-BIPOC artists, let's say, but that colleagues rather, but that there's an additional element. I mean, Tommy, how have you found that in terms of working alongside a manager to really understand, are the opportunities, are they the right opportunities? Are they the wrong opportunities? Every artist has to consider that. Why has this been offered to me? And frankly, whether it's offered to you for the right reasons or the wrong reasons, is there a reason for you to do it? Is there something that you could get out of it? How have you had that conversation with your management over the years?
Yeah, it's from the artist perspective, it's a little bit complicated because you see opportunities. You've trained your whole life to make music on stage for people, and at least I was taught, by my family, that you have to take every single opportunity that you can, to make your career. And I mean, traditionally, I always encourage, students that play for me or anybody, like that pipeline that we were talking about. They ask me, how do you learn this concerto? How do you learn this sonata? Like, how can you play this from memory one week and then another concerto the next week from memory? And my simple answer is essentially experience, performance. Take every single opportunity that you can. Play a house concert this week, play for your friends the next week, play through for, a friend that you are gonna, make them suffer through, like buy them lunch. These are all things that I encourage people to do. And I think we take sometimes that mentality through to our later, developmental stages or, later career, and we actually want to take everything. And we want to do. But distinguishing between doing things for the right reasons and not is extremely important, because in the end, like from the artist perspective, we're so sensitive in ways that we can't maybe perceive right away. So if we're on stage doing something for the wrong reasons, it affects the performance. It affects the product. And this is why finding purpose in the work so deeply is so important for people who are on stage, is because if we're not really wholeheartedly believing in what we do, whether it's Dvorak concerto, whether it's Mendelssohn concerto, whether it's, a new commissioned piece, it doesn't matter. If you don't wholeheartedly feel like you're inside of the music and believing in it, then you're not gonna, the audience is gonna mirror your feeling. Yeah. So finding that and making sure that you're doing what's true to you, and making sure that our support system, the managers, whether it's, educational or whether it's, later stages, it's important that it's all done from a genuine perspective, and that everyone's on the same page as far as what that artist in particular is going to feel most convinced by in front of an audience, because that's in everyone's best interest in the end. Yeah.
Christina, you told me a story about your YCA artists and how they are mentored by other artists, and I think of that as we talk about how we protect this young talent, how we make sure that they're in the right place. Maybe you tell me a little bit about how that works at YCA.
Well, we are actually in the process of launching a alumni mentoring program. YCA is I think a 64-year history. There is it's a big, gorgeous family, and so we want to engage some of the older artists. I think artist to artist is a different conversation than artist to manager. I think that they can really be in their shoes and sort of share stories and help. So we want to do that too. We want to use this incredible community that we have to benefit the younger generation of artists. So that's one thing that we're doing. And I wanted to go back quickly about engaging communities and artists telling stories. And when I think about Xavier Foley, who was obviously from Sphinx as well, before he came to YCA, he is now performing his own concertos everywhere. And it's sort of like, you can engage my artist, yes, and he will come play the Bottesini Grand Duo, but only if we pair it with his concerto.
Right.
And I think that's also just a way to sort of use the fact that everyone wants a more diverse season. Everyone wants to engage these artists. But it's an opportunity to make sure that their story is told too.
Right.
And so I think we take that and we just run with it, because these voices are so exciting and they approach the repertoire differently, and they want to share this with different communities than what we're used to in the past. And that's what's very exciting.
I'm sure there are many young artists in this room and who are tuning in who are looking to be managed. They want a career as a soloist, and they're looking for management. What advice, I'd love to hear from each of you, what advice would you offer them in terms of, what should they be looking for as they're having these conversations with managers? How should they go about evaluating who should be on their team, especially through the lens of being a BIPOC artist?
We talked about this yesterday in the session that Randall Gooseby and Lydia Connolly from Harrison Parrott and I had, and we were just talking about how he had made the decision amongst all of the managers who he had the opportunity to consider. And I think fundamentally it came down to figuring out who he felt most comfortable with. On a human level, this is your most important professional relationship. You are putting the future of your career and your money-making possibility into the hands of someone. So you need to trust them. You need to feel comfortable with them. You need to have faith that they represent you in a way that you wouldn't cringe when you hear, oh, I got an email from your manager and they were pushing this. And you have to really have that trust. But Randall was saying in the session that he could quickly tell on meeting all these different management agencies who was interested in him to check the box, to just say, okay, we have a BIPOC artist and this is going to check this box. He could tell the difference between that and between the managers who really were interested in him, his talent, and in figuring out where he wanted to go and what support he needed to get there. And somehow, through conversations, you have to discern that. With regard to getting to the point of having these conversations, I would say just do what you need to do that makes you feel whole as an artist to get your music out there in the most authentic way. Don't do projects that aren't truly authentic to you because you want to be noticed by management agencies. It's such a crowded marketplace, and it would be a pity for you to put work in just to try to get noticed. So be as authentic as possible. Manage your career yourself. Don't expect concerts to come just because management will eventually be there. You need concerts to get management. Management will get you more and more prominent concerts, but you need to be managing your own career as an entrepreneur and CEO of your brand. And once you're super busy and you don't have time to manage your career, then you're ready for management.
Tommy, how would you engage with that question? What advice would you offer for maybe yourself 10 or 15 years in in that
Yeah.
process?
I mean, my journey was slightly different. I mean, I went through. I guess when I think about how I first got management, I think of just, first of all, sometimes it's just about being at the right place at the right time.
Right.
You know, there is that factor, and before Sphinx competition in 2016, I had been asked to be a part of a piano quartet, and that piano quartet was formerly a very famous string quartet, and they were managed by someone who was really, was able to essentially foster the beginning of my essentially recital career with the pianist Ilya Yakushev, who was the pianist of that piano quartet originally. So we both left that piano quartet and started our own kind of duo in a way. And that allowed for a lot more performance experience. And then that led to Sphinx competition, and then that led to a lot of other concerto engagements. And I was on the Astral Artist roster, and wonderful Vera Wilson. She was a mentor to me, like you are to your artist, and to somebody who really was never shy about saying, you cannot wait 48 hours to respond to an email. You have to be on top of this. If you're going to go forward, you need to. She was a mentor in a lot of ways that I'm just so grateful for. And she actually, to this day, she's still my manager with Sarah. And so we've maintained that relationship through Astral. And, to me, I guess, I was always very proactive about making sure that if I met somebody, or if I just shared my passion and my excitement for what I wanted to do with everyone that I could, maybe something would happen. Maybe something somewhere, someone would be interested. And, I did not have the luxury of, 10 management offers, but I have a lot of grit and persistence, and I'm always asking questions, and I'm always trying to find the next thing, and it keeps me up at night. But I love that because it leads me to so many wonderful musical experiences. And so I guess the biggest thing from artist to artist would just be, you have to spend a lot of time clarifying what you want to do in the profession. Sit down with a notebook at a coffee shop for 2 days straight and just write things down. You don't have the luxury of doing that. Just spend several days just writing what you want to do. What are you passionate about? Because that's going to be the thing that gets you up and writes those emails and makes you not wait. Right? It makes you want to work as hard as you possibly can to make those connections, to be in touch with people, because it's the crux of what you're passionate about. It's not just about what you think you should be passionate about. So that's mainly the thing, which is you got to have grit and you have to have a thick skin. Because I can count all the successes, on one hand that made my career, and I could count on 50 hands which were failures. And some of those things were things that I thought to myself, should I be doing this? Should I really be doing this?
Back to that point of authenticity and really engaging in the art that feels right.
Yeah.
And I think on all sides of the business, we've all felt that a bit.
Yeah.
Last question before we take some questions from our virtual and our audience here in person. Essentially, for you, Christina and Charlotte, same question. If you are a young artist manager, a young administrator who wants to be a better supporter, ally, someone who's really amplifying the work of BIPOC artists, what advice would you give them for getting into the business or being better at that component of it?
I think understanding or being open to understanding an artist in a more holistic sort of way, like being in for everything that they're representing and all the impact that they want to make. Like, it's just so much more than the playing. It's so much more than just getting the gig. So my advice is to sort of really be a great listener and a great advocate. And, you know, working with artists that you're passionate about projects. I mean, it's very hard. I think, you know, out of the phone calls that we make, I don't know, if out of 100 phone calls, maybe we get like 2 getting to the next step. It's a very, very hard business. But if you're passionate and you're passionate about your artists and what they're doing, it is a lot of fun. So I say bring passion. I say bring very open ears and open heart. That's my biggest advice.
Hearing a big theme here about listening, really listening to your artists and understanding that that your job is not to make them the next Anna-Sophie Mutter. The job is to make them who they are, right? To amplify what's important about their artistic about their artistic vision and their artistic drive. Charlotte, last word.
In addition to the authenticity and supporting that, I think that setting them up for success, and that plays a role in the decisions that we're making. Is this the right date for us to accept? There's a lot that goes into saying a yes, this is the right date. What can we do to advance ahead of that date to make it a success? So when Randall plays next week with the Boston Symphony and his debut with their music director, Andres Nelson's, we worked really hard to get the Bruch Concerto. And there were a lot of different concertos, and we wanted the Bruch. It is the piece that he played when he was 13, and he was here, and he won the Sphinx Junior competition 14 years ago. It's the piece he knows the best, and we have worked over the last 18 months to insert 18 engagements of him playing the Bruch. So next week is a moment that culminates 18 months of us prepping him. It wasn't just, yeah, we'll do the Bruch because he's known it since he was 13. We have strategically placed and manipulated opportunities to say, nope, he won't do it unless you're taking him for the Bruch. Otherwise, he won't come. So saying no, setting them up for success, and helping them to be as authentic and in their best form as possible is what I believe our jobs as managers is.
So important, and unfortunately so incredibly rare. Real strategy. Let's go to questions. So we're also going to welcome our virtual audience tuning in as well. You can ask questions either at the microphones. I think there are microphones on either side of the room here. Or you can ask questions via the Sphinx app in the Q&A section of the Ren Live tab with the access code REN. I don't know how any of that works, but there you are. And why don't we take, I think we have someone here on my left,
Yep.
please.
Good morning. It's Jenny Billfield from Washington Performing Arts. Hello, friends.
Hi, Jenny.
Thank you for this great conversation. I think that the realities, the challenges, and also the growth in our field is really important to chart. And Charlotte, I was thinking about your sort of observation of the timeline, and one component that I feel we need to acknowledge as a really, really big part of this is the importance of many different types of representation on our board of directors. Because I found that when there's a board of, and this is really like a vertical, seamless vertical integration of diversity and values around equity and inclusion in every aspect of the organization. Because the board ultimately is responsible for setting the tone by which the staff, carries forward a vision and a mission. So it certainly, with Washington Performing Arts, the more different types of thinkers we have on our board, the more we are challenged to examine sort of nooks and crannies in our own thinking and planning. And my observation is that when there is that presence of many different types of thinkers on the boards, that's when the right questions are asked for the right reasons about how work and programs intersect with mission. It's one of those things where if you don't have that presence, then you don't realize what's missing necessarily. And so, and this conversation goes in tandem a little bit with the whole notion of decolonizing wealth, and this sense that all wealth is centered in sort of the white kind of patriarchy. What we actually know is that there is wealth all over the place, but it chooses to affiliate where it feels impact. And so the arguments about wealth, about representation, and all of this is still trying to catch up with so many aspects of our society. But I think these things are linked. And as we begin to acknowledge that wealth and power are beginning to spread more evenly, we need to be aggressive about that, that this sort of acceleration, this momentum will continue. But we do have to look at the way our boards are constructed. And for anybody who is thinking of putting together a board, you need to think about that because it's going to shape and influence the tone of an organization. So the board thing hasn't been, or the governance thing hasn't been brought up a lot at the conference, but I really feel as though that's a hidden area of power that we need to lean into and shape alongside all of these important inflection points. So not a question, but just kind of like let's do that too. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you for that comment, and it's so true. I mean, it really does connect to the whole pipeline of from when an instrument gets into the hands of a young musician all the way to the end of their career. All of the inputs, are they all diverse? Are we all really taking our part in making sure that what ends up on stage, and the board is absolutely an important part of that. Thank you for that comment, Jenny.
Hi, this question is from the virtual audience. What does it take to become an artist manager, especially if your background is in orchestra administration?
I went the other way. I mean, you're the panelist. I'm going to let you take that question.
I think that you need to, I mean, there's certainly agencies that you could go work for. A lot of us started in the booking department. That was always sort of, if you can go out there and book dates and get engagements, that's step one. And then you sort of move up into the management. But I suggest reaching out to one of the artist managers, myself, Charlotte, anybody, and we can see if we could maybe hook you up with an internship or see if anyone's hiring. But I encourage you to start there and spend like a good year or two to see if it's for you. It's a little stressful, but it is incredibly rewarding. But there are definitely many ways to get into the business. So, yeah.
For my part, I would also suggest to this person that as they're working in an organization, really trying their best to spend as much time with the artists who are there as possible. When I did the shift from being an artist manager to moving to an orchestra, one of the things that I found was the fact that I had been on the ground daily working directly with artists was so important in kind of contextualizing the work that we do at an orchestra, because it's not quite the same. And so just making sure that in whatever organization you're in, you have that contact with the artist. I think that would put you in good stead for your next career in artist management.
The second question is, could you share about balancing between venues who want BIPOC artists for the sake of diversity versus providing opportunities for your artists?
Charlotte, would you like to take that question? Could you maybe read the question one more time, just so we're clear?
Sure. Could you share about balancing between venues who want BIPOC artists for the sake of diversity versus providing opportunities for your artists?
That really kind of gets back to the, why are we being asked and how do we, but please go ahead.
Thanks for the question. I think that it does come back to weighing whether this is the right opportunity to capitalize on. As we've discussed, putting on a filter in your consideration of the invitation is very important on why you've been asked and what that opportunity is. every aspect of an opportunity needs to be considered on the collaborator, on the profile, on the market, on the repertoire, and on the fee. So I think when you take a look at all those aspects and it does set you up for success, it has to have things that resonate with you on all those different aspects. So again, like I talked about with Randall Gooseby, we receive many invitations, ones that aren't right for him, places that he should be, markets, collaborators, conductors, repertoire, type of way he's being presented, the context in which he's being presented. For instance, I said we have his New York Philharmonic debut in all the parks of all 5 boroughs of New York City this summer. Mendelssohn Violin Concerto, Thomas Wilkins. And this is not the first invitation that we've had from the New York Philharmonic. But this is the right invitation for him because he is playing Mendelssohn Concerto all season. He's been playing it last season. He's with the National Symphony Orchestra and Thomas Wilkins 3 weeks before. He's with him in all the 5 boroughs, and it's culminating in something. When 2 years ago, the New York Philharmonic came to us and said, we want to present Randall in the inaugural presentation of the renovated David Geffen Hall in recital in the new David Geffen Hall, I'm like, no, that's absolutely not the way that Randall Gooseby should be presented in his New York Philharmonic debut without an orchestra, in recital, in a vacuous hall where I don't know how the acoustics are going to sound. No. Thank you for thinking of him. But it was not right. So you have to weigh all those different factors to set your artist up for success.
Setting them up for success, so very important. I think we are out of time. I want to thank all of you for being here today, and I want to thank you for these wonderful and insightful questions. And I'd love to thank our distinguished panel, Christina Baker, Charlotte Lee, and Dr. Tommy Mesa. Thank you so much for your perspectives.